Welcome, everybody. My name is Jill Jonathan. I'm the host of The World We Want, and today my guest is Representative Dr. Jasmine Clark. She's a mom, a microbiologist, and state representative from Georgia. And now she's running for Georgia's 13th congressional district to bring a science voice to Washington. She's brought it to Georgia, and now she's taking it to Washington. So welcome, Jasmine. It's so good to see you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Jill. It's a pleasure to be here. And also, yes, I am currently bringing a science voice to the Georgia State Legislature. And with everything that's going on in our country right now, I really feel like Washington, D.C. could use one. So I'm running to bring one to Washington, D.C. as well.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. So, Jasmine, I know science has been a big part of your life, even from an early age. So, can you tell me a little bit about when you really discovered your passion for science?
I've been a science nerd my whole life. I was that kid that wanted the chemistry set. I loved puzzles. My dad's a doctor. My mom is a nurse. I grew up always thinking like I'm going to be a medical doctor when I grow up. I didn't quite become a medical doctor. I took a little detour and instead went into research science. But still doctor, and also still getting to feed that science, that need for just discovery that I've had since I was a little kid.
Yeah, and can you tell me a little bit about what kind of degrees you have and the area of study that the path that you took?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a PhD in microbiology, and I got an undergraduate degree in microbiology as well from University of Tennessee. PhD from Emory. Did a short postdoc project also at Emory in HIV research. And I am actually currently serving as an assistant clinical professor. And not in the lab as much, really, not really having an opportunity to really be in the lab, except for in the teaching labs, because being in politics, life is a little bit more sporadic. In research, you need a little more stability. So, still very much into science, still very much, doing research in other ways, and now helping to shape young minds to also love science as much as I do.
I love that. And so tell me a little bit about, you mentioned your job as a professor, and my understanding it's in the nursing school at Emory University. So tell me just a little bit about what you do there.
Yeah, so I teach pre-nurses. So I teach undergraduate students that are interested in going into nursing, and they have to take microbiology and anatomy and physiology. And so I teach those courses, and they're really the courses that create the foundation for their nursing training, making sure that you understand, infectious disease from a basic science standpoint, and also making sure that you understand the human body because you will be working on the human body, and you want to know what the body is doing, or what it's supposed to do when nothing is wrong, so that you understand what is happening when things are going wrong. Along with that, I also have the honor of teaching graduate students in policy. And so, being that I serve in the legislature, it's nice to be able to bridge between policy and science and health. And so that is what I do at the nursing school. And I absolutely love it. I love that I can, make all of those worlds mesh.
I love that too. So, talking about making those worlds mesh, when do you feel like you recognized the need for a strong science voice in government? And then, I think I kind of know this answer, but then what did you do about it? I think I know that answer, but when did you
Yes.
recognize that?
So I always tell this story. On a one fateful night in November of 2016, I went to bed a scientist, and the next morning I woke up a mad scientist. And I say that to say that, we elected the same person who is now running our country. We elected him back then in 2016, and it was devastating for me. But what followed afterward was worse than I could have imagined. We moved into this era of alternative facts. I don't know if y'all remember the Kellyanne Conway alternative facts. One of the first things that Donald Trump did in January of 2017 after his inauguration was to tell the CDC all the things that they could not talk about, including things like climate change. And so that led me to being named the leader of the Atlanta March for Science. There were marches for science all over the world, not just the country, all over the world. And I led the one in Atlanta. And that's when I realized that we really need people in government that understand science more than at surface level, or at least respect the people who do understand science more than at surface level and can tell the difference between an expert and a Google search. Like, there's just so many things that I think happens in government that people don't realize. And one of those things is that a lot of decisions get made by people who have absolutely, positively zero idea about that subject matter. And so that is why I decided to run. When I decided to run in 2018, I got elected. And then when I got to the Capitol, I still was kind of like, well, what's a science girl like me doing in a place like this? And like, how do I fit? But I realized one, um, I'm used to reading. We read papers all the time in science. So I read the bills. A lot of people are discovering that people in elected office aren't even reading the things that they're voting on. And they're like, what? Because I was the same way. I was like, what do you mean y'all aren't reading it? I read it. Secondly, I ask tough questions because that's what we do in science. We ask questions, and we don't just ask, we ask to understand. We ask to understand implications. We ask to understand consequences. We ask to understand causation, and we want to make sure that the conclusions that we make or the outcomes that we expect actually make sense. And so that was another thing that allowed me to realize that it actually is good to have people with different perspectives and different backgrounds in the legislature. And one of those backgrounds is having someone with a science mind in the room to ask the questions the way a scientist might approach these policies that we pass.
Yeah, makes complete sense to me. So, what are some of your biggest accomplishments as state representative? Because you in your third term? Is that correct?
Fourth,
Fourth term.
actually.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm in my fourth term. We are elected every 2 years. And some accomplishments, a lot of time. So I'm going to preface this with a little disclaimer. I am in the minority party in the state of Georgia. Not only am I in the minority party, I am also in a very competitive seat in the state of Georgia. So it's very difficult to get a bill passed when you sit in a competitive seat in the minority party. But that said, accomplishments aren't always what bill you got passed. Sometimes accomplishments are what bills you stopped, what bills you shone a light on that, they tried to pass in the dark. And also, things that you're able to do even outside of the legislature. One of the things that I am really proud of was shining a light on Georgia's uh, quote heartbeat bill, as they called it, House Bill 481 back in 2019. And this bill, the author of the bill had lied. He put in a fake organization and then quoted that fake organization in order to justify why this bill was needed. And again, going back to reading bills and reading to understand, when a person cites something or quotes something, it is very natural for me to go look at that source. Like, that's just kind of how I would do a scientific paper as well. Like, oh, they got this information from this paper. Let me go look and see like what that was all about. Um, I caught them in their lie, red handed. And it was a moment. I was a freshman legislator. I mean, I had just gotten there, but it was a moment of accountability. It was a moment that said, someone in here is actually paying attention. we can't get away with things the same way we might have been able to before, because they're paying attention in a way that other people aren't paying attention. And I want to be clear, because I don't want this to sound discouraging or disparaging to my colleagues as a whole. I just think I approach it differently than other people. Um, Another a great example of this is when Brian Kemp and his Department of Public Health tried to justify keeping Georgia open during the pandemic, while everyone else was kind of trying to take more mitigation measures. And he did so by saying cases in the state of Georgia, unlike anywhere else in the entire world, are going down. And he put out a graph that showed this perfect downslope of um, cases in Georgia, COVID cases in Georgia. And it was completely fabricated. They had moved all the dates around to make it this beautiful downslope instead of putting it in chronological order. And they literally, the title of the graph was case number of COVID cases over time. So you
Wow.
expect that they would be in chronological order. There was really no way to justify them doing that. So they kind of just wrote it off as, oh, someone made a mistake. Oops, our bad. But again, it was an opportunity for me to use the way I approach things. If you put a graph in front of me, you better believe the first thing I'm looking at is the axis. I want to know what our axis label are. What are we actually looking at here? And I'm going to analyze it because that's what I do. So that's another example. I think those are two glaring examples of why it's good to have those science voices in the room. As far as passing bills, I've passed a couple of bills on, homestead exemptions and things like that. I've played a role in stopping some pretty bad bills and also calling out my colleagues on the floor when they are using bills to target individuals or to ban books and different things like that. But overall, like, I know that having that science voice in the room has been a value add to the Georgia State Legislature, and I would love to take that to Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Well, I mean, something to be incredibly proud of. And so, fast forward from when you first started as a state representative to today in 2025, where, I don't know, Jasmine, what's going on? What's going on at the CDC? What's going on at the national level? Could you even imagine that this is where we would be?
I'll be really honest. I am one of those people that I will never say I never make mistakes. I think
Yeah.
as human beings, we all make mistakes. And I feel like in 2016, the country collectively made a mistake in electing Donald Trump as our president. And people had their reasons for doing it, this reason or that reason. But overall, I felt like as a country, we had learned our lesson.
Right.
And so in 2020, when Joe Biden was elected, it said to me, okay, we recognize that this was a bad idea and we definitely need to go in another direction. I am not one that needs to touch a hot stove twice to know that it's hot. But apparently, as a country, we are now seeing the impacts of touching a hot stove twice. And let me tell you, when you touch a hot stove once, you burn yourself. And the body builds, like, some scar tissue. You'll never be the same. You will never be the same. When you touch it again in the same place, you are doing even more irreparable harm to what was already damaged. And so I feel like we're now in a state in our country where we knew what was going to happen. We're seeing the consequences of it, and it's really impacting everyone. So, for example, we are now seeing a full blown, concerted, surgical attack on vaccinations. Something that, as a person with a microbiology background, I can tell you wholeheartedly, there was a time where people would have been begging for something to stop the spread of these childhood
Right.
diseases or to to find a cure to or something to prevent certain cancers. We have those things available now, and now we have a concerted effort to undermine that. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We now have a health and human services director who is completely obsessed with autism while also not really understanding what autism is. And so he just says things. He just makes up things. And he says them as if they're true. He says he can look at a child and just know that they have mitochondrial disorders. And like, people are like, well, he's using big words, so it must be true. And it's like, actually, no, it's not. That is not how we diagnose mitochondrial disorders at all. And he's saying things like, oh, we have unlocked the cause of autism and it's Tylenol. And it's like, that you cannot make claims like that just willy-nilly. Like, there's a way to establish causation in science, and it's not just I want to be right, so I'm going to make up things that at least kind of sound true. Tylenol has some toxicity, yes, to the liver. But we really need to be careful about the conclusions that we make, because Tylenol is actually one of the few safe pain relievers and fever reducers that pregnant women
Yep.
can use in moderation. And now you're trying to take that away with anti science. So we're in a bad place in our country right now. And those are just a couple of examples. I mean, measles is on the rise. I live in the state of Georgia. HIV cases, we are one of the top states for new HIV cases in the country at a time where HIV research and funding is being cut. These are things that we're dealing with as a country, and these are things that, similar to when you touch a hot stove and it's never the same, these are things that will impact us in a very long term,
Yeah.
even if right now in the short term it just feels like, oh well, we can fix this. No, these are going to be things that are going to last for a while.
Yeah. And so, my next question, which I think you've just been like touching on like the whole time, is the intersection of science and politics, which I feel like maybe a lot of Americans hadn't really thought about too much. And if they hadn't thought about it, they're definitely thinking about it now. So, what would you just say to like the average American who's not a scientist, who hasn't really thought about that connection? What do you think that they should know?
I think that it's very important for people to realize that policy doesn't happen in vacuums. If I make a law about one thing, it's never just about that one thing. It's always going to spread out. And the reason why is because, I'm going to use a science term here, we live in an ecosystem where one thing does have an impact on other things. If I make policy about vaccines, and say, oh, no one needs to get vaccines anymore, that has an impact on access to vaccines for people who do want to get the vaccines. That also has an impact on immunocompromised people who need, they literally need vaccines to create a hedge of protection around them to stop them from getting things that they cannot physically protect themselves from. Even if they were to try to get a vaccine, a lot of times vaccines don't work with them because vaccines need a strong immune system in order to work. You know, all of these things are happening. And so you're like, oh, well, I'm fine. I have vaccines. Yeah, well, please understand that a sick society does
Right.
impact you. A sick society impacts our economy. A sick society makes everything health related cost a little bit more. All of these things are connected to each other. And so you can think that you're okay, but I recognize, because we operate in ecosystems, that none of us are okay if things keep going in the direction that they're going.
Yeah, and so I have a feeling I was going to ask you next, what was the point where you're like, okay, I want to take this to Washington. What made you decide to run for Congress, and how's it going so far?
Honestly, there was a confluence of events that made me decide to run for Congress. One, I am currently represented by a congressman who has been serving in a legislative capacity for pretty much most of my life. He was in the state legislature, he's been in Congress for over 20 years. And, you know, I think that we definitely need to have a turnover of new voices and new ideas if we want to be able to continue to move forward. We cannot stagnate.
Yeah.
We can't be a puddle. We need to be a river. We've got to move. Um, at the same time, uh, as his health is slowing down or he's facing some health challenges, we are in a moment where we really need like people to meet the moment.
Right.
And so we need leaders in Congress who can bring something to the table that is going to help at least keep our country as much as we can, because my goodness, in the last 9 months, I never would have imagined how much damage could be done. But we need people that can fight back against what's happening in our country. And so with RFK Jr. there, I really feel like we need a counter voice
Yeah.
to that. We need a counter voice that's not Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm sorry. Marjorie Taylor Greene should not be the voice of Georgia when it comes to speaking about science, but she's actually the one I've seen speaking the loudest about science things. Mind you, loud and wrong, but still loud. And so we need counter voices to that. And so these are some of the reasons why I decided to run for Congress. I will be honest, like, just recently with the untimely and tragic death of Charlie Kirk, I am the first person to be anti-gun violence. My platform speaks for itself. The bills that I have introduced speak for itself. I have always been against gun violence, but I am also very much, as my track record will also show, anti-racism, anti-sexism. And I definitely do not agree with a lot of things that Charlie Kirk said while he was alive. And so when there was just recently resolutions to honor his life and legacy, I think this was an opportunity for us to say, I condemn political violence and gun violence, but I do not have to
That's
celebrate
right.
someone who was very vocal in his racism and sexism. He built his whole persona on those things. And my congressman was one of the few Democrats and the only Georgia Democrat to vote yes on that resolution to honor his life. And I think that was like, I mean, this just happened, but it was a moment of like, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's time. It's time for a different voice to be in that seat.
Yeah. Wow, I agree, Jasmine. Oh, you're just so amazing. And just to like round out the conversation, like I titled the show "The World We Want" because I really like we have to talk about all the things that are going wrong, but we also have to talk about what we're doing to make it better, which is exactly what you're doing in your daily life. So, can you finish this sentence? I want a world, and then just finish it however you want to.
I want a world where we acknowledge everyone's humanity and we acknowledge that everyone has a right to just be who they are and to live, a healthy life and just to be. Because right now, I'm just not seeing that in our world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think that's something we all should be striving for. And then before we go, Jasmine, can you just tell everybody where people can find you on social media and support you?
Absolutely. So you can find my website at Jasmine4GA. That's JASMINE, the number 4GA.com. And also you can find me on social media, all social media at Jasmine, the number 4GA. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, X. and also TikTok.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I highly recommend following Jasmine. It'll make you feel a little more sane when you see some of those headlines. You're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And you're like, okay, Dr. Jasmine Clark is there. We've got sane people. We need more of them. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you so
And
much for having me.
I just encourage you all just to keep creating the world that you want.